Leaked documents show that Emirati security chief is actually making a bid to Interpol to be the president. Now, this comes after the former president was representing China, and since his arrest, Interpol's credibility has really been under fire, more so than usual. However, these leaked documents show that the Emirates is escalating its power within Interpol, or at least trying to, and in doing so raises a question whether Western nations should continue to fund and to trust Interpol. We have European civilians, we have Americans, Australians being arrested on the basis of their relationship with Interpol, not because of their relationship with the end users of Interpol, which is essentially what's happening. We have human rights abusers like Saudi, the UAE, Turkey, Egypt, Russia, and China using Interpol to expand their powers beyond the jurisdiction. That means that if the UAE or Saudi want a journalist arrested because they have spoken out about a political situation in Saudi, they can misuse Interpol's membership to have that person arrested in a foreign nation. That nation could be a European country, it could be America, where you're going to be afforded the sorts of safeguards that you would want from an extradition hearing. But it could also mean that you're arrested in another country, an Asian country, an African country, countries that don't stand up for human rights as much as we would like them to. For example, we had Hakim al-Raisi, who was arrested on a Bahrain-issued Interpol notice in Thailand, and he seriously faced a real risk of extradition back to a country that he had fled from and actually been granted asylum from because of the risk that he would be executed. So this is what we're saying. Interpol is being used to expand the powers of abusive countries, countries that practice extrajudicial killings, torture, human rights abuses, arbitrary detentions, lengthy and unfair detentions. And now they're able to do that not only in their country, but in our countries, through use of Interpol's database. So when a country like the UAE issues an Interpol red notice, a European country or a Western nation will arrest that person, no questions asked. They'll arrest them, they'll detain them, they'll persecute and prosecute them, subject them to lengthy, unfair detentions while they face extradition proceedings. And not all countries are set up to see that the Interpol red notice has actually been abusive. They just automatically trust it. They don't look into the details, and if they do, it takes them a substantial amount of time. People can be jailed for more than a year on the basis of a frivolous red notice coming from a country who we wouldn't usually take seriously. Now, if Saudi or the UAE contact our enforcement agencies and ask us to arrest someone on the basis of a bank debt, are we going to do that? Absolutely not. However, if they route it via Interpol straight into the database, Interpol doesn't ask any questions, it goes onto the red notice database and they'll be arrested at an airport. They might even be tracked down. We had a flight attendant who was enjoying a dinner in Rome recently when 8 Italian officers launched on her hotel restaurant and arrested her, detained her. It was a terribly embarrassing ordeal, but not only was it embarrassing, but she was subjected to detention in Rome. She was forced to stay in the country pending extradition hearings. She lost a lot of money on lawyers defending herself for what turned out to be an abusive red notice. It's already a concern that Western nations are subscribing to Interpol. Interpol, to most people, we would assume that it's run by countries that value human rights. We would assume that the US plays a huge part in it. We'd assume the UK and European countries play a huge part in the administration of Interpol, and of course France. But it's not so much the case. It seems to be a pay-to-play organisation. And guess who is investing the money in Interpol? Of course, it's going to be your top abusers, the ones who want to misuse and extend their powers beyond their borders for a fee. And countries that are guilty of this are certainly the UAE, certainly Qatar, Saudi, Russia, China, and Turkey. Bahrain too, and Iran, who have been directly responsible for the arrest of countless Westerners, countless victims of injustice, and these people have had their lives turned upside down. They've been jailed in horrendous conditions in Ukraine, in Thailand, all sorts of places. And they've had to pay for their own legal fees, of course. They've lost their employment, lost their reputations. And when they're finally released, who is accountable for this? Interpol is not offering compensation. Worse than that, though, they're not actually penalising the countries who repeatedly abuse the system. Now, every time I argue with Interpol on behalf of a client and have their name removed from the database, Interpol knows that notice was abusive from the very beginning. They're not cancelling it for any reason other than it should not have ever been issued in the first place. So they know which countries are repeatedly abusing their system. And if they know this, what are they doing about it? Absolutely nothing. They're doing nothing about it. There are no sanctions in place. They are not cancelling anyone's membership. In fact, they are requesting even more cooperation. They're asking for more cooperation from the most abusive countries like the UAE. And the fact that al-Raisi, a human rights abuser accused of torture in the UAE, is applying to become the president of Interpol shows you just how little regard is given by the people at the top of Interpol. And that puts Western countries in a very precarious position because we're subscribing to a database, we're acting on a database against our citizens on the basis of abusive notices coming from abusive countries. And the thing is, we're aware of this now. It has been hidden in the past. These abuses have really only become mainstream press attention over the past few years. But now we can't pretend that we don't know that this is happening. I'm part of a lobbying group in Washington DC that's bringing it to the attention of the Senate, of US government. I'm also bringing it to attention. Australia's known about it for a long time, and the UK. So it's something that we're aware of now. So if Interpol's not legally accountable by way of being this international organisation that seems to have unlimited impunity, we're going to have to make the governments that subscribe to Interpol accountable directly. Now, we're going to be issuing advice and warnings to European countries and Western nations about membership to Interpol. And we're going to be saying that basically, if you subscribe to Interpol and you arrest someone on the basis of an abusive country's red notice, then you're essentially being complicit in that abuse because it's so frequent, so regular that it's foreseeable. And once it becomes foreseeable, if the government still acts on it, they're going to end up becoming complicit and liable to lawsuits from the victims of these human rights abuses. So let's see how that goes. But certainly Interpol has suffered incredible criticism over the past 5 to 10 years, documentaries, media news, all sorts of things. You know that we've got this case of Connor Howard in Greece. We've got Alan Stevenson and Robert Irwin just in the past really few months has been covered on the BBC and everywhere else. So it's come so much into the spotlight that I think it would be a huge shame and a huge embarrassment if they appointed an Emirati as the president of Interpol. And I would be advising all Western nations to relinquish, essentially to cancel their membership to Interpol, and they're going to have to start something new because this kind of corruption, it can't continue. It's a violation of human rights, and we cannot allow abusing nations to extend their borders into our domain. So thanks very much. Hi, Anthony. Hi, Grace. Hi, Sienna. All right. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Cheers.